so that people who are not able to join us today are going to be able to listen to the conversation that we have and provide their thoughts. But I think just about everybody is here. So I really appreciate folks taking the time to join us for this conversation today. I will start sharing my screen. When I was practicing this earlier, I lost the ability to watch my team screen while my presentation was up. So I'm hoping that Kathleen or Matthew or someone will let me know if something's happening in Teams, either with a chat question or something that needs to be addressed. Please feel free to interrupt me, because clearly that's going to be more important than my presentation. So I'm just going to share this screen, and I'll take a minute to do that because that has our agenda on it for today. All right. Now it's doing that thing again where I need to. All right. Can Matthew or Kathleen give me an okay that this is showing up on everybody's screens?
Yep, should be good.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate it. And now we're going to do the thing where it doesn't advance the way I was expecting it to. Terrific. As indicated in the agenda that I sent out last week, we'll start with brief introductions, especially for the folks who are on their cell phones. I'll give you a moment at the end to introduce yourselves if you're not showing up on our list. We'll talk about the timeline, what the anticipated schedule is for this work now that we're in the middle of it. We're going to talk about some of the feedback that we've already received on the existing policy. I have 8 areas for this discussion that we need to cover. And then we'll do the prioritization exercise. And I'm very excited for this. Kathleen's going to share her screen for this. But, you know, we talk about the hierarchy and the modes and the great graphic that we have that is easy to understand. And this is going to be our opportunity to reimagine that and talk about what it should look like and what our priorities are as a city. And I hope everyone's excited for that. So as a result, you know, when we think about the time and how we want to use our time until 10:30, I'm hoping that we can get through all the policy areas by probably, I don't know, 9:45 or 10 at the absolute latest, so that we can spend some time on the prioritization exercise. So I want to let you know that so that we can hopefully keep the agenda moving, but everyone still is able to contribute and let me know your thoughts on the content so far. So we'll start with introductions. I think if it's easiest, we'll go down this list as we do a brief audio introduction from folks who are joining us today. My name is Katie White, if we haven't met in person before. I'm a transportation planner in Minneapolis Public Works, and I'm the staff person managing the process of updating our Complete Streets policy. I wonder if Kathleen, you could go next.
Hi all, Kathleen Mail in Transportation Planning and Programming. And just a suggestion too, I know there are some folks on here who don't know each other, so if you can turn on your screen when you introduce yourself, it'd be nice, I'm sure, to match a name to a face. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Kathleen. I know Paul is out on furlough today. I'm wondering if Alan's joined the call.
Good morning, and I'm getting my screen turned on. If you can see me, good morning, Alan Klugman with Minneapolis Traffic and Parking Services. I'm a traffic engineer at the city.
Thanks, Alan. Is Liz able to join us today?
I am here. I'm Liz Stout. I'm with Minneapolis Public Works, Surface Water and Sewers, and I'm the city's water resources manager.
Thanks, Liz. Matthew?
Hi, Matthew Deardahl, Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator in the Transportation Planning and Programming Division of Public Works.
Thanks so much. I don't think Ryan was able to join us today. Am I correct? Okay.
Yeah, he's out today. Yep.
Thanks so much. And Membere, I'm not sure if he was able to join us.
Yes, I am here. My name is Membere. I'm from Transportation Engineering Design, Construction Group in Survey Crew.
Terrific. Thanks. It's good to meet you. Adam, I saw, joined us earlier.
Yep, I'm here. Adam Hales, City of Minneapolis, Public Works. I'm with our Transportation Engineering and Design group.
Thanks, Adam. I don't believe Steve was able to join us today, but I think Katie should be here.
Hi, Katie Kowalczyk, City of Minneapolis, Water Resources Coordinator, and kind of filling in for the Green Infrastructure Coordinator.
Thank you. I know Steve Mosing declined the invitation for today, so I'm wondering if Jim Welsh is here.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, good morning. First of all, I am in, I'm trying to connect via Microsoft Teams, but it says we've let people in the meeting know you're waiting, but it just keeps on timing out, and then I try and send another signal that I'm waiting to get in, but I think I've experienced this before as well, so I don't know if it's my computer, but just thought I'd let you know. So good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Jim Welsh. I represent the city's Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Thanks so much, Jim. I haven't heard about a timing out phenomenon, so I'm going to listen for more information about that. Thanks for letting me know that you were running into that. I saw Alyssa join us.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alyssa Shuffman. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I sit on the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Thanks, Alyssa. I know Ash was able to join today.
Good morning. My name is Ash Narayanan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with an advocacy group, Our Streets Minneapolis, and I'm also the 408-8876 number on the phone.
Terrific. Thank you, Ash. I appreciate it. I know I admitted Alex Burns to the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Alex Burns. I use he, him pronouns. I'm here with Move Minneapolis work as an outreach specialist, but have been helping out with some of our policy work and excited to join here today.
Thanks, Alex. I know Kevin was able to call in.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Kevin Lewis. I'm the president and CEO of BOMA, which is the Building Owners and Managers Association. So I represent the interests of the commercial office buildings in Minneapolis and in Hennepin County.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Kramer. I'm the president and CEO of the Minneapolis Downtown Council and Downtown Improvement District.
Glad you could join us today. Thank you. John Tompkins from MnDOT.
Yes, it's John Tompkins. Good morning, everyone. With MnDOT Metro District, I'm the Multimodal Planning Director.
Thanks, John. I know Jessa joined us.
Good morning, I'm Jessa Trebojevic, and I'm with Hennepin County's Transportation Project Delivery Department, and I lead our design division.
Thank you, Jessa. I know Steve Mahowald is here today.
Good morning, Steve Mahowald, the Senior Transit Planner with Metro Transit.
Thanks, Steve. And Paul joined us.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Mogish. I manage the Community Planning Group in CPED of the City of Minneapolis. We're the Minneapolis 2040 people.
That's a good introduction. I like that, Paul. I'd use that a lot. This is a great group. I think just about everybody is here, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. So thank you for joining us. And I appreciate Kathleen's suggestion about turning on the cameras when possible. It's very helpful. I mean, I haven't even seen Kathleen in person in 8 months, so that's always nice. I wanted to briefly review our timeline with where we've been and where we're going. In September, we used this group to introduce the work over a brief meeting that we then recorded. And today here in November, we will share the direction of the changes that we plan on making to the Complete Streets policy as a result of that feedback. I know I heard just this morning that there are 2 other agencies that have not had the opportunity to submit their feedback yet on the existing Complete Streets policy. And so I'm looking forward to getting that feedback over the next day or by the end of the week, maybe. And so I just want to acknowledge that there's some things that agencies have perspectives on that might not be reflected in today's content. I am hoping that we can reconvene this group in December. I'll be sending out a meeting invite very soon because I know the end of the year is going to be a very challenging time for all of us as more, maybe kids are staying home from school and maybe some people have the opportunity to travel. And so I think our schedules are just going to be very constrained. So I'm going to try very hard to find some times in December for us to finish this conversation. But I would wouldn't be surprised if I also sent out some dates for this first week of January as well. After that, after the next meeting of this group, we are looking to have our Complete Streets policy update go to the City Council in early 2021. We don't have a date yet targeted for that. So I'm not sure, maybe by December we'll have a narrower band of when we expect to see that go to the City Council. But over and all, this has been a fairly manageable process. Don't expect to see it drag on too long. So the following slides, and again, I'm targeting sort of wrapping this up by 9:45 or 10 o'clock to talk about the feedback before we move into the prioritization exercise. The following slides summarize what we heard in September and how the comments will be incorporated into our draft policy. These include comments from our September meeting, some one-on-one calls I had with folks after the meeting, and SurveyMonkey results for folks who responded to the SurveyMonkey. I think that link might be dead now if the two agencies are trying to follow the SurveyMonkey link. So just email me directly. You don't have to worry about using the SurveyMonkey tool. Some feedback about what is working in the current policy today. The framework makes sense and is easy to understand. I believe this also may have been referencing the graphic, the hierarchy itself, because it's pretty simple and straightforward. Other comments about how helpful the document is in understanding the city's goals and priorities. And I really appreciated this comment that the policy focuses on process as opposed to technical specifications. And this process has been well executed over the years. So now we'll move into some topic areas. For folks who were able to join us in September, you may recall that in our Transportation Action Plan, we committed to updating the Complete Streets policy in 3 topic areas, specifically freight, green infrastructure, and micromobility. So those 3 are what I'm starting with here of the 8 that we're going to talk about. So we committed to freight, green infrastructure, and micromobility, but we opened it up for other areas for change as well. So those will be the 8 that we're going to talk about. For freight, we heard that designing streets for freight vehicles is dangerous for non-motorized modes. Sometimes freight can require wider lanes, wider turning radii, and the elimination of some bump outs from street designs. And there's also suggestion that new technology provides the opportunity for freight to be delivered in different ways through neighborhood drop box locations, electric bikes, or robots, or other strategies. So the new policy, when you see it in December, will treat large trucks and smaller deliveries differently. Some of you may be familiar that we are updating our street design guide right now as well. And that street design guide is doing a lot of work to accommodate and mitigate the impacts of large freight vehicles while accommodating their movements as necessary. And our new Complete Streets policy will state that design, operations, and education will all be used to mitigate stopping in bicycle and pedestrian facilities instead of relying on just one strategy. The comment has come up that for large freight, there's a lot of operational procedures in place that help manage large freight. And we should think about using a whole suite of strategies as well for smaller freight. I'm wondering, before I go any further, if there's any comments or questions about freight specifically.
This is John Tompkins, MnDOT. Yeah, I just want to endorse what the new policy is. I think, again, that when we look at freight vehicles, there are some challenges in it in the street design, but there are major corridors throughout the metro and within Minneapolis that there's nowhere else for the large trucks to go but down certain routes. So I appreciate this flexibility.
Thank you, John. Yes, the new street design guide has, there's a freight network which is different, but we're calling out street typologies that are maybe in some parts of the city that are very specific to freight, like Northeast Industrial, where there's just, there's no other uses really. So they're really getting into the nitty gritty of that document. We're trying to keep that level of detail outside of this document.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
I'm going to embrace the awkward pause on Teams as we go through these 8 slides. So I'll just wait a couple seconds to make sure people can unmute if they want to contribute something. Okay, seeing none. Green infrastructure. Some feedback we've heard on green infrastructure, not just in complete, after September, but sort of in general comments that we've heard over the years, is that the maintenance of green infrastructure after installation remains unclear. Is it always the neighborhood's responsibility? Under what conditions is it the city's responsibility? There's some question there. And there also appears to be a perception that green infrastructure is used differently in some parts of the city, and other parts of the city see it in a different context or different ways, and sometimes it's not always clear why, when maybe soil type might make a difference or other changing conditions. What we're hoping the new policy will do is to describe the current policy considerations. There's a great story that Liz Stout on this call can tell us about how we have a new permit coming through MPCA that's requiring green stormwater management on linear reconstructions. And it's a new policy world that we're living in, and it's a new requirement. And I think that's important background information to people be aware of as we look at projects happening in the right of way. We'll also describe some potential treatments that are available. We don't want this to be an exclusive list or an exhaustive list, but we're hoping that we can see it as more of a toolbox or as an example of what people might be seeing in their communities that are effective and good ways to incorporate green infrastructure on streets. Some people don't know that green infrastructure is in their facility or is near their house because it might be below ground, and some stormwater management is above ground, and so it just looks different. And we'll tell that story. And again, there's more work happening right now in the street design guide talking about green infrastructure in a lot more detail. So we don't want to duplicate that work, but we do want to reference it, and we talk about what our streets look like and what a complete street looks like. So I'm happy to take comments now on how people feel about the direction of this portion of the update.
Katie, I just wanted to add one thing, and that's sort of about how we consider the transportation options in relation to just environmental issues in general, not necessarily just green infrastructure, but both the stormwater impacts and the environmental impacts of transportation decisions, and making sure that's something that's looked at when we are making these requirements. That it isn't just this highest level of transportation that's the deciding factor in our complete streets.
Thanks, Katie.
Mm-hmm. Katie, this is Kathleen. Do you mean like things like materials and stuff as well, or just wondering if you'd elaborate a little more, just so we all yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that's come up recently was the sidewalk width, and I'm not saying this is the only thing, but just in general, like how much impervious we have has a direct impact on, how much stormwater we have. And so when we make decisions about the sidewalk widths, we decided needed to be 6 feet everywhere. And I think that decision has somewhat been adjusted, but is that really the case? Does it need to be 6 feet everywhere? Could it be 6 and 5 on some very low density or low streets? I don't think that was considered, and just 1 extra foot of right of way on non-arterial roads, I think costs us on the stormwater side somewhere between $11 and $26 million. So, and then that's not even considering the environmental impacts of not being able to fit green infrastructure on those streets or not being able to fit more green space in general. We also know has health impacts for our communities.
Thanks.
All right, I'll move on from green infrastructure to micromobility. This is really interesting to me because if we had had this conversation 2 years ago, I think we would have gotten a lot of comments on micromobility and scooters and electric bikes and bike share and everything else. But I did not see any comments come in since September about micromobility. I think this is actually really positive and a huge testament to the work that Kathleen and the rest of the Public Works team did on the Transportation Action Plan before I started at the city last year. I think that there's just been a lot of really important conversations within Public Works, but also across the city about what micromobility is and how it impacts the uses of our streets. And just really important conversations that have happened, and people feel really comfortable with where we've landed is my understanding of this lack of feedback. So in the bicycle chapter of the new Transportation Action Plan, we have some definitions and treatments outlined there as reference, and we're not looking to change any of that. And we're looking in this Complete Streets update to treat micromobility similar to bicycles. In state law for operations, they're sort of equivalent to bicycles, and that's the direction we're headed here. Also, of course, that's the city's direction because that's how they're paired up in the bicycle chapter of the Transportation Action Plan. I'll do a little sidebar. Our Transportation Action Plan went to the Transportation and Public Works Committee last week of the City Council. There were a couple of amendments before being moved. Kathleen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's going to the full City Council on Friday, December 4th. I'm seeing some nodding, so that's good. So just a huge accomplishment and really tying up those loose ends as we move into implementation and the rest of the work through, the Complete Streets policy, the street design guide, that kind of work. But I'm wondering if there's something that folks disagree about or would like to add to the conversation about micromobility, since we didn't hear anything about it over the last couple of months. Now would be a good time to share it. Okay, this is great. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. So outside those three topic areas that the Transportation Action Plan committed to updating, we did receive some feedback in other areas. So there's 5 of these. We'll talk about construction impacts first, hearing that construction impacts disproportionately burden non-motorized modes. When you put up a construction detour, for instance, it's easier for an automobile or a truck to detour than it is for a bicycle or pedestrian. So the new policy will provide the same level of protection for people walking and biking during construction as during non-construction action or conditions. So this aligns with our current Transportation Action Plan, again, getting adopted next week. It's called Strategy 9 is where we talk about construction. And there are 2 actions that relate to this. 9.1 provides safe, direct, and comfortable temporary facilities for non-motorized users during construction. And 9.4, inspect and enforce non-compliance at construction sites where pedestrian walkways are not being cleared of snow and ice. And so I'm not sure that the new Complete Streets policy will say anything. We'll follow the direction here from the Transportation Action Plan because that's been a consensus decision about where we want to go. So obviously that's an update, and that's a little bit of a change from where the document currently is because it was written in 2016. So that's where we're headed. I'm wondering if other folks have comments about construction impacts, or if this does or does not address the comments that were originally made in September. Okay, seeing none. I'm just going to assume that everyone's saving up all their comments for the prioritization exercise, which would be great because that's going to be a terrific conversation. Winter maintenance is something that has been a huge conversation in the city over the last several years now. What we heard is that lack of winter maintenance disproportionately burdens non-motorized modes. The new policy will continue to highlight the importance of prioritize winter maintenance as a key element of access for people walking and biking. And will align, similar to construction impacts, align with the actions in the Transportation Action Plan that we've committed to. So there's Walking Strategy 4, which includes several. I mean, there's a list under this strategy of actions to improve winter walking and rolling. And in the bicycle chapter, Strategy 6 also has a list of actions to maintain the All Ages and Abilities Network to provide year-round access. I didn't list out every single one of those afterwards, but if you contact me after this meeting, I can link you directly to the pages online where you can read this in more detail if you're interested. The one change has been, as I mentioned, the Transportation Action Plan went to the Transportation and Public Works Committee last week, and there was an amendment to one of the actions that you'll find online before it goes to the full council next week. And walking action 4.10 was amended. At the end of it, they added the language, evaluating city-led clearing of snow and ice on the pedestrian priority network. And so this is something new that would be very different in the city to evaluate the ability of the city to clear snow and ice. So Kathleen has been more involved in those conversations about what winter maintenance looks like in the TAP, and then potentially other public works departments as well. So if there's anything you'd like to add, Kathleen, or if folks have comments specific to winter maintenance, now is the time to make them.
I guess I'll add one for the bike strategy because I think it's really important. Currently, we have a level of service goal for our protected bikeways to clear them within 24 hours of the end of the snowfall. And then we have a system of bicycle boulevards that we're sort of reframing as neighborhood greenways moving forward. And currently, those don't have any type of what I would say extra level of service than adjacent low volume residential streets. So that's a goal of TAP, is to evaluate how we can, improve the level of service. So there's an expectation that those will be cleared as well. And I think that would be a big difference in how people feel about biking.
Thanks, Matthew. That's important context.
And also, Katie, there's a lot of action in chat right now that I think is maybe worth talking about. So it's around the green infrastructure, and maybe would it be appropriate to dive back into that real quick, or should we wait till later?
Well, we're kind of into winter maintenance, but can we do green infrastructure before we move on to the next one after winter maintenance?
Sure, cool.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate it. Other comments on winter maintenance? This is another one that's gotten so much airtime over the years. Okay, let's take it back to green infrastructure. I'm afraid that if I start messing around on my Teams page, I'll regret it, but let's see if I can find it. Does someone want to, Matthew, do you want to summarize or call out on someone to?
Alyssa, would you like to highlight what you said?
Sure, I can do that.
And
sorry for being late on that. I am in a. My partner and I are both working from home and both on calls right now, so I was trying not to be super disruptive. Yeah, so my thought was just it was a follow-up comment to the idea that we should be considering smaller sidewalks in some areas to preserve impermeable surface. And I think if we're thinking about the complete streets policy, putting people who walk first, that we really should be thinking about reallocating that space from cars rather than saying we want to increase the net impermeable surface. I totally agree with and support the idea of making sure that we're not adding more and more and more impermeable surface, but thinking about that as space we should be reallocating from cars as opposed to space we're adding.
Thank you so much for that feedback. And I totally understand about balancing time. My 2-year-old just left the house to get her COVID test, so that was pretty loud on my end. So I apologize if that was disruptive to other people.
I'll add to as a follow-up. There's cases where there may be existing low volume of pedestrians right now on some of our lower volume residential streets. Those are prime candidates for our neighborhood greenways, which the idea there, or the vision that we're trying to create, is to reduce the street itself by about half, ideally. And so that may be an opportunity to keep, the nice wide sidewalks, but also adds a lot of green infrastructure.
That sounds exciting. Is there anything else that I've missed in the chat for green infrastructure that we should call out? We're doing really well on time, so I'm not worried about anything right now.
There were just several people who appreciated the comments that were just made. So
terrific. Thank you very much. Then with that, I'll move on to our next topic area, which I'm titling Transformative Change, but happy to be corrected on that. A comment that we heard is that the Complete Streets policy should be used to completely reimagine the streets. And this new policy will be one in a continuing series of steps to reimagine how the right-of-way is used by people, and will work to advance this work that we've seen over the last few years, the 20-year streets funding plan, the Vision Zero Action Plan, and the Transportation Action Plan. And this is a cumulative effort to transform how the streets are used throughout the entire city. I think that the way I'm looking at this process is that there's no one thing that is going to make the change, but the city has taken action over the last even just 5 years. You know, the way we spend our money and the way we think about our process has been dramatically changed over the last 5 years. And by continuing to update this document and others, we aren't going to be stagnant or stop innovating what our streets look like. But I'm happy to take comments on that if folks would like to take the conversation in a different direction.
Hey, Katie, this is Ash with Our Streets Minneapolis. Just wanted to commend the work that Public Works has done over the past few years to take those steps to start thinking about what our right-of-way might look like. And, you know, we've seen just a huge change in things like better bike infrastructure, walking infrastructure, and I think the transportation plan is such a good next step for all of us. Just wanted to reiterate, you know, this is also an opportunity for us to do some real transformative type actions, perhaps maybe imagining a network of car-free streets, for example, or just things that really take Minneapolis to the next level in terms of being a leader in making sure folks can get around biking, walking, and rolling.
Thanks so much, Ash. All right, I'll move on to our next slide. The exemptions process. What we heard is that having an exemption process is not transparent and is not in keeping with the spirit of the policy to create transformative change. And this new policy will consider that feedback. I think we did a review, and I'm pretty sure that we determined, and Kathleen can correct me if I'm wrong, we determined that no project has received an exemption over the last few years. And so, you know, it calls into question, like, what is the exemption process? What was the intent? How has it been used? Not much, not at all. And then why do we have it? And so that was a great conversation to spur that conversation, for sure. So this one's pretty short. So I'll move along to the next one. So this is our last topic area for discussion. So after this, I'll have another pause for feedback before we move on. This last comment that we received is about this conversation about level of service. If you look at the Complete Streets policy, you know, it's about a 4-page document, and there are 2 short introductory paragraphs. And in the second short introductory paragraph, there's a sentence that says, we will prioritize essentially non-motorized modes. And then it says, while providing acceptable levels of service to all modes. And so what we heard was that including that phrase of, you know, the graphic, the hierarchy, and which prioritizes non-driving modes. And so we've had a lot of conversations about level of service and what it does and why it's important. And so as a result, the new policy is very likely to remove the phrase while providing acceptable levels of service to all modes. In its place, probably not in the 2 paragraphs, but we'll add language about the importance of traffic analysis and measurement tools, which is important in all the work we do. You know, the word evaluate shows up so often in our Transportation Action Plan because it is an important part of what we do when we make changes on behalf of the right-of-way. We'll also be adding language recognizing that increases in delay driving force. So my goal is, I think at the next meeting, I'd like to try to have a red line version available for the group. And I think you'll just see a lot of new language. I don't think that we're adding a ton, but we are going to be adding some links in order to have these conversations. Do you folks have comments about this level of service?
This is Ash again, and sorry if I'm speaking too much, but I just have a question about what does it mean when you say add language about the importance of traffic analysis and measurement tools? That is concerning to me because that seems to suggest that we are going to place a higher level of importance on traffic analysis, which often, shows up in terms of increased delay or worsening level of service. And, as the Transportation Action Plan has indicated, we are hoping to move away from LOS as a really important measure in terms of determining success and outcomes on our streets. And so can you explain a little bit more, Katie, what that means?
Sure. So as you referenced, the Transportation Action Plan says, I think the verb is remove level of service, except where necessary for application purposes. And so, this is meant to be in keeping with that spirit of removing that. I think it's also important to understand what our impacts are on travel and then to be comfortable with it. So I think that there's sometimes where we would like to see, hey, what happens if we close down 6 blocks to traffic? And through these modeling tools, which have been around for a long time, you can get an idea of what that impact is. And then when you use those tools, we recognize that an increase in delay is not going to say, hey, let's not, make this change. So being, Alan's gonna shudder, being comfortable with that, so we have to understand, we're not going to make decisions based on comfort, but we have to understand what the potential impacts are going to be, and not say no because of that. We don't want LOS to be a gatekeeping, but we do want LOS to be a tool that we use, and I don't think that that's going to go away.
Hey, Katie, maybe if I could just jump in for a moment, and Ash, what I would say to you is, I'm just going to use a line I've used myself several times in speeches over the past couple of years when I talk about the Minneapolis Transportation Network or signal systems that I work a lot with. And the line we've used is that peak hour level of service is a performance metric that we'll report on, but it's not necessarily a design standard. So we just try to acknowledge that it's a useful number to understand that has meaning, but it's not necessarily what we're pegging our design to. So we kind of acknowledge both sides of that.
Thank you, Katie and Alan. That's really helpful. And just here, while we're on the topic of traffic analysis, I just want to recognize that folks are using other measures now as well, like accessibility, for example, that really tries to capture how various modes are performing from, a delay standpoint, in things like how transit is doing, how walking, biking, rolling are doing, and just kind of encouraging folks to move on from the LOS metric.
Thanks,
Alyssa.
This is Steve. I'd like just to make a quick comment if I could. And I don't mean this to be argumentative, but I'm not in favor of gridlock. And so if this discussion is moving us in the direction of we don't care anymore about whether traffic moves, especially in the downtown environment, I think that's problematic. I think it's really important for this group to understand that as we make the transition back from the COVID-induced impacts downtown, we're likely to see more people driving and parking as a transition, hopefully back to transit and other modes. And so we need to be conscious of having a functioning commercial core in our city. So I want to make that point loud and clear. Thanks.
This is Alyssa. I'm actually gonna. I hear what you're saying, Steve. I think one of the things that I know is that when we look at places with really great walking, really great biking, really great transit service, those are also some of the most congested cities in the United States. when we reallocate space from cars to people walking, biking, rolling, using transit, it does come with additional congestion. And so I actually think the opposite, that if we are thinking about level of service as a metric, congestion actually is a good thing and a sign that we are going in the right direction.
This is a great conversation. I'm leaving it open for folks to continue it. I don't want to shut it down. I'm hoping for more feedback here too.
Alex, you should go ahead.
I just wanted to echo what Ash and Alyssa said. I think concerns about congestion downtown are outmoded in our current understanding of how traffic and congestion work. And when we have this confined right-of-way, we're never going to be able to expand our way out of those issues. So we have to, I think the prioritization exercise will be really helpful in talking through those issues, but to think that we're just going to expand roadway until we don't have congestion, I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I would echo what Ash and Alyssa said.
Steve, you had a comment?
I'm certainly not suggesting that we expand right of way. I'm pretty well aware that the amount of public right of way we have is a pretty finite resource. What I'm talking about is a more balanced, realistic, and I'll use that term, I know that's probably inflammatory to some folks on the call, approach to the needs that people who come to work, who service downtown, who live downtown, who want to visit downtown, the way they actually move, at least over a transitional period. You know, my organization has been in favor of a multimodal transit system serving downtown for decades. We're very much in favor of the micromobility options that have been introduced to downtown as a way to move around. So big picture, moving in the direction that the city is moving, all for it. But in the immediate term, at any given point in time, again, I'll use the term realistic. We believe we need to be realistic about how people move as they make transition towards alternative modes. So I just hope the city doesn't kind of throw that out from an ideological standpoint, because it's really important, especially, I'll say it again, as we come out of COVID, that our commercial core rebounds strongly. The fact that the city has suffered significant financial setbacks is a function of a moribund downtown economy, and we want that economy to come back as strongly as possible in the coming years. And the way we manage transportation and the way people move around downtown is going to be an important part of that.
And if I could add to Steve's comments, Kevin Lewis here, I think BOMA is in the same frame of mind that we promote to our members, to promote to the tenants in the building. Move Minneapolis has done a great job of educating tenants and their employees and so on. But I think we all are understanding that this is going to be kind of a gradual process. It's not something that anyone's throwing roadblocks in, figuratively or realistically, roadblocks in it. It's more that we still need to, with the amount of new buildings that are opening up and the amount of tenants that are occupying those buildings, and then the residential growth, you're going to see a lot more folks in Minneapolis once we get past COVID and so on. So I think what Steve pointed out initially is something that we agree that we need to be open to all forms at this point as we gradually work towards goals in the future.
Yeah, this is Jim Welsh. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Jim.
Hi, thanks. So I think, excuse me, unfortunately, I'm not able to be a part of the online chat. I would love to be able to see what's happening there. But one thing I'd like to point out is that I think it's really important when we think about how we make downtown a better place for everybody. You know, at the end of the day, it's about the experience on the street outside of your car. And so, Steve, I appreciate your concerns, but I would argue that that the goal should be to enhance the overall experience downtown. And again, focused on outside of your car. And as others have said, congestion isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think the goal or the focus should be on making downtown as attractive a destination as possible. And that means minimizing automobiles.
I just want to bring it back a little bit to the level of service conversation. And I've been on some projects lately, and this is anecdotal, but I think it's sort of indicative of where we're heading, where we were talking about a potential roadway reconstruction and what the impacts would be for reducing it was moving from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And the conversation never touched level of service. I don't know that I ever heard anyone mention what it is and what it would be. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? But they did have the conversation about, well, how much then, how close are we getting to gridlock was something that was discussed. And at least in that project example, that was something that people wanted to avoid. And so I think that, the word balancing is probably a challenging word for a lot of folks, but there definitely is a balance. Alan does it every day with his signal balancing is, how do you keep things from backing up and keep people moving, because we don't want, I think that's a challenging fine line to find, but our fine line used to be in a different location a few years ago. And this is over the results of the years of change that have happened in Minneapolis. Now this is our sort of tipping point that we're negotiating right now. So this is a really important conversation. I'm very glad that folks are speaking up.
Katie, we have a few hands raised, so why don't we go Steve, Wald, Ash, and then Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. So I just wanted to chime in about the word balance here, and I heard someone mention, we shouldn't go too far in the direction where we're maybe talking about eliminating cars or something. I don't think anyone is suggesting that we give away all of our right-of-way downtown to walking, biking, micromobility. I think if you talk about balance today, the vast majority of right-of-way downtown is still given to the movement and storage of cars. It is not comfortable for me, for example, to bike downtown. It is just, there's mostly 3 or 4 lanes of traffic, and it's not a good place for, biking or even taking a scooter. There's maybe a few exceptions. So when we talk about balance, I think we should talk about bringing at least downtown into the modal hierarchy that has been specified in the Complete Streets policy, and we're very, very far away from that today, to be realistic. And so, I think as we move forward in the city, we should not be afraid to say that all new trips that we hope to happen in downtown will be made in a mode other than a car, as the Transportation Action Plan says. Thank you.
Kathleen, you said Steve from Metro Transit wanted to say something?
Yes.
Thanks. Very good conversation. And this may seem a little bit strange, but I got to throw a little bit of support to Mr. Kramer's way. I think it's going to be a transition, and there's always a balance. And I think as long as our goals are transitioning to, reducing SOVs and increasing walk and biking and transit, and we got the measures in place to keep moving in that direction. I think it's key that we also remember that having a healthy downtown, and part of that's allowing folks to drive downtown or accommodating that is essential. One of the reasons that I think Metro Transit has been able to, in the peak period, pre-COVID, to carry, over 50% of the folks coming in the downtown by transit, is that we got a very energetic, healthy downtown. And again, part of that's, I think, accepting and realizing there's always going to be folks that are going to be driving. That said, I think focusing on increasing the mode split for transit, walking, and biking, and having measures in place that we can move in that direction is good. Thanks.
And then Alex, you also had a comment.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification, Steve and Kevin. I think I really just wanted to echo what Ash said. I think he said it really well. And when we talk about balance, things are just so fundamentally out of balance right now and continue to be. And I appreciate you mentioning Move Minneapolis, Kevin. That's where I work. And I'm in these meetings almost every day with employers talking about how we can get them on buses or we can get them walking or biking to work. And the consistent theme throughout those conversations is I don't feel safe biking into downtown because there's not enough bicycle infrastructure. Like it's really hard walking downtown in the winter because of snow and ice clearance. I don't have a bus that will get me downtown anywhere close to the amount of time that I can already get there by driving. We've prioritized driving above all other modes. So I appreciate the comments about balance. I just think that we have a different idea of what that balance looks like. And if we're guiding this conversation by the needs dictated by the climate crisis and even by city policy with the goals that were set in the Transportation Action Plan, I think it looks different than just maintaining the status quo and incrementally trying to achieve something better.
So I'm hearing a lot about balance and priorities, and I'm thinking now is a good time to transition to our prioritization exercise.
Say, Katie.
But I want to check and make sure if there's more comments. Yeah, Matthew, what's up?
Sorry. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. John Tompkins would like to say something.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, just real quick. I know the language about balance, that's extremely difficult when you're dealing with a lot of different modes. I just wanted to ask a question about intermodal. Is that part of the conversation as far as the level of service? How much intermodal activity do we focus on in this policy?
That's a great question. I think we're going to talk about large freight versus small freight in the prioritization exercise.
Well, it's not necessarily all freight. I'm almost of intermodal, whether it's from bike to transit or from transit to car or whatever it may be. Is that a part of
I
the
see what you're
process?
saying.
Yeah.
Sure. We haven't framed it like that. Maybe Kathleen can correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be a new way to take that conversation, I think.
Yeah, John, do you have thoughts on like what you think would be appropriate to talk about related to that, like easy transitions or ensuring their like interconnectedness of different modes, or what angle?
Yeah, mainly based on connectivity to different modes. For example, we have park and rides, within and around the metro and in Minneapolis as well. So just for example, connectivity to that, connectivity from intercity train service, different types of modes that connect where the mass of people would, need a smooth and easy connection to.
Interesting. Well, that's a great thought.
And then there's one additional comment, Katie, in the chat about comment from Alyssa on LOS. I'd be interested in seeing the city start to measure LOS for walking, biking, transit. Alyssa, I'm just doing that in case you were trying purposely to not talk out of respect for your home situation.
Yeah, that's great. That we've been having interesting conversations with MnDOT as they look at these other tools that might exist. And yes, there's, we want to know about the impact of, if we can accurately measure an impact or forecast an impact for non-motorized modes, that would be an important tool to have. Yes. So before we transition to the prioritization exercise, I want to thank everybody for that really terrific conversation. it's a very difficult conversation to have in the best of times and even harder to have virtually. So I want to thank everyone for chiming in as you can in the chat or over the call. And thanks for your understanding as we work with this technology and still your willingness to engage. And I really appreciate that. So with that being said, I'm just going to flash our prioritization exercise up on the screen, or prioritization framework that we have right now. And just a little reminder to folks that back when this was created in 2016, a lot of other cities across the country had a complete streets policy, but they didn't always have a prioritization or a hierarchy like this. And so this was new and fairly unique. And so it's been 4 years, so let us happen. It's time to update this. And I'll stop sharing my screen then, and Kathleen's going to take over. And this, we're really excited about this. We have created a new series of potential icons, and we are going to see how we want to visualize them. So I'll let Kathleen share her screen, and then we'll get going.
Sure. So I'd say to start off the conversation, some people I think are surprised to notice that, like, oh, there's 4 pages of a policy document that goes with complete streets, and just kind of really refer to this as their starting point. And this carries, I think, a lot of weight in terms of just like everyday conversations about the city of Minneapolis's complete streets policy. So wanted to have a bit of an interactive time with you all, and I can, there's other ways that it looks right now. It's been updated sometimes to look more like this, but same general principle, right? And so maybe tell me if you get dizzy, but we've got a series of, scooting and rolling and walking and biking and driving, and we could even have like a multiple passenger driver and busing, and here's, more people powered freight and small box cars, and there's parking, and there's green infrastructure, and there's larger freight. So like we have things at our disposal to kind of like throw into a matrix if we wanted to here. We could have a placeholder if there's something that isn't showing up here. And this is just a brainstorming. I can make multiple iterations, and it's going to help us as we continue to develop and have this conversation about where we want to take this. So we're not deciding like what we come out of this meeting is it and we're done, right? But I think this will be a really helpful part of the just like design process for us as we're thinking and trying to articulate the different conversations we've had on the different elements of the policy into something visual that people can kind of wrap their head around quite quickly. So.
Yes, and I imagine at the end of this 30 minutes, we might have like 3 or 4 of these, just like hanging out on the screen. We're not picking one like Kathleen said, but we should create one, and you can even call it like, hey, this is Katie's hierarchy, or you can email me afterwards and tell me what your hierarchy would be. But now is like a brainstorming time, free for all. And I don't know if Kathleen, you want to throw some icons in order to get a reaction, or if someone has an idea that they want to throw out to start with.
I might just say that I think there hasn't been a lot of like contrary about keeping walking and rolling up on top, but I'll just start with there and stop talking.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Not a lot of negative feedback about having walking and rolling at the top of our hierarchy. Do we want to throw biking and micromobility at the same level?
Well, right now they're below.
Oh, right. Sorry, I meant, micromobility equal to biking, but I wasn't trying to say where they go if it's below.
So we could
start with that at least for a reaction.
Maybe I'll put our starting in, right? And then we can go from there. This is our starting point right now. Adding micromobility to be with biking. And I don't, so what else do people think? So freight is a new thing we've talked about. This is green infrastructure, supposed to symbolize, a lot of different types of freight, a parked vehicle.
Steve from Metro Transit has his hand up.
and I'm sure you folks have heard plenty about this, but in terms of micromobility, you know, the issue seemed to be pre-COVID is how do you control the spaces that these micromobility users, the vehicles are, you know, where they're stored, where they're put, keeping them out of the pedestrian right of way. And I guess that, you know, that gets down to the implementation and enforcement, but that would be, I think, one concern we would have, where, you know, how we control those unused vehicles, and also the interaction with the pedestrians of the micro, you know, the scooters and that.
What that makes me think of, Steve, is like there's this kind of joint parking. Right now we have parking as a car, but there's also maybe parking as a micromobility piece.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
We could consider putting that somewhere.
And would we want to include bicycle parking as well with that?
Yep, sure. Where would something like this, you think, go? And I mean, they don't have to be all grouped together too, right? Like this could be, you know,
to do a parking hierarchy.
You know.
But Katie, I think that's a good comment in the parking hierarchy. Yeah, because you would want to make it more convenient for folks on bikes and micro, you know, scooters. Easier for them to park than perhaps you do someone coming in a car.
So if we had our own little, what I just heard is if we had a parking hierarchy, and maybe it's a separate thing, maybe it's within, it's like, this is our parking hierarchy.
This is Alyssa. To the comment that was made earlier, I think, you know, the idea that micromobility parking is taking away space for people walking is a problem. So I would also love to see if there's a separate sort of parking hierarchy, that people walking are still at the top of it. And that we also, like, not that you park people, but benches for people to rest are really important for people walking and people with disabilities. I would like to see that reflected in some of our thinking there as well.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add the green infrastructure is going to obviously be something that often competes with parking. So it'd be nice to see how that incorporates into the whole parking as well.
Okay, so wait, hold on. Sorry, I just want to. Here's benches. This is a placeholder for benches, and then we had a green infrastructure comment, which is competing. So that's kind of hanging out. One idea I had, I'm just sorry to interrupt whoever was about to talk, is green infrastructure. There's also an element of green infrastructure that, like, maybe what I'm going to do is move our parking conversation. Okay. You guys, this isn't me always at my finest here, okay? Real-time interactive. My point is like if we moved this, sorry. Anyway, that green infrastructure, like we are going to be required by ordinance to include green infrastructure too. So whether it's like up at a top or on the side as like it's a requirement that we address this, is maybe something to think about how we deal with that.
So John Tompkins, this is really interesting that we're spending a lot of time talking about parking. John Tompkins has said in the chat, small package parking should take the priority in parking. So small, you know, short-term parking is more important than long-term parking, maybe, but you know, deliveries above all, maybe. That's an interesting nuance.
Yeah, and just to elaborate a little bit, that was mainly because a lot of e-commerce, especially in the downtown area, and I know for some of the carriers, you know, they still have a challenge in parking or parking illegally to accomplish, you know, their needs. So, again, someone rather take the ticket, pay the ticket, and you know, deal with the consequences. but it'll be helpful to have, at least for the small package carriers and, some parking priority.
Do you think, John, that that's like, I mean, if we were putting it in this hierarchy of parking, right? Do you think that's here or up here?
Well, I'll say it'll be up somewhere in a level where the scooters are, I would say, somewhere in there.
This is one of those things where I don't know that would be easier to do in person, so we're fine doing this digitally.
So I guess I have a question. Is it practical to think about a parking hierarchy different than a part of our complete streets policy hierarchy? Is that fair to think of that? They all are using the same space, right? It's like they're all like, does it even make sense to do that? Or should we somehow look to integrate in?
I do think it kind of makes some sense separate, because one aspect of this is the physical space, but then channeling my internal Alan Klugman, a lot of this is like operations within the space that we've defined, so like curbside management, and so I do kind of think it makes sense a little bit separate, just because it's really operational once you've identified some space.
That's an important nuance. Good job, Matthew/Alan.
How do people think of, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, this is not a comment specific to parking. So if other folks have thoughts on the parking pyramid, I'll hold my thought.
No, that's I'd like to hear your thought outside the parking pyramid. Thanks.
I think one thing that I am really struggling with is I think right now we see rolling in this pyramid as sort of a catch-all for the experience of people with disabilities and the way that they need to get around the city. I'm not a person with a disability, although I did have a period of my life where I was like very limited mobility. And I'm interested in sort of, right, we know that bikes are assistive devices for folks, and also that transit is a major important part of that. And so I would really, I guess I don't have the background to speak to that in a meaningful way because I'm not a person with a disability, but would really like to see some input reflected from different folks with disabilities about how the pyramid lands with them, and whether that sort of separation of rolling and biking and transit meets their needs, or if it ends up sort of undercutting the principle that we're trying to operate on here, which is like we're putting the needs of people with disabilities at the top of the pyramid.
Thank you for that comment. That's a great question. I'm taking old school notes today on paper and pen instead of on my screen, so that's why I'm looking down.
So we talked about adding freight, micromobility, and green infrastructure as a minimum to our policy. Right now, this is our existing hierarchy. So how would folks think of whether it's some sort of combination of this one, and this one, whether it's one of them, two of them, whatever, and or this tree representing green infrastructure? What are people's ideas for putting them into this pyramid here? I'm going to share my idea, which, people can say they don't like, if they don't like, but I kind of think based on the legal, like green infrastructure piece, it's almost like there's a sidebar to our green infrastructure or to our hierarchy, which is like green infrastructure has got to be accommodated, right? It's going to be for projects that touch our right of way and we're disturbing the amount of impervious surface and whatnot. And Katie, I'm sure you can speak more eloquently to this. It's like, it's just mandatory. So it's almost like,
I'm not sure how that fits, because I would also say that a sidewalk is mandatory, right?
Right,
I
a
would
par.
say I like that.
Yeah.
Right. So like one of the things I do like about this kind of sidebar that you have is I think there are two things that we need to use to adjust these priorities, which are climate change and racial equity, right? And that isn't part of the prioritization in terms of like one specific thing to throw in there, but it's something rather that we have to look at this as a whole. So something like an EV station versus, you know, single occupancy vehicle parking could then, you know, move above something else. I don't know exactly on the carbon reduction side. I'm much more on the, you know, on the green infrastructure side, but certainly like climate change is just like too big of a thing to be ignoring right now. And so not having a way to layer that and make adjustments with that in mind, I think that makes the green infrastructure priority different, because sometimes green infrastructure doesn't take any space in these modes, right? If you can push it underground, it might not take any space. So, you know, I think, I don't know where it goes in the hierarchy, but I do think that it fits into this whole, into the climate change and racial justice, and racial justice pieces, which then makes it more of a priority, especially the pushing it above ground where it has more benefits.
What if like to your point, Katie, what if they thought about these things as like filters, right? And I don't know how this will actually turn out, but like that we use these filters that are more policy or whatnot approaches, climate change, racial justice, green infrastructure, and then we work through the hierarchy. And I know that's a simplistic way of talking about a designer operations decision, but like from this kind of caricature of it.
Or is that like a lens, kind of like filter lens? Sure. Steve from Metro Transit had his hand up.
Yes, I'm wondering if the reconstruct of A Street downtown and 4th Street downtown don't represent a good example of this hierarchy in terms of the green infrastructure, pedestrians, bikes perhaps not, but in terms of wider sidewalks and more landscaping. It seems as if, from my perspective, perhaps those two reconstruct projects are a good example of what you're trying to achieve here.
Someone else has their hand up and I can't tell who it is. Hold on. Alex Burns.
I just wanted to make the comment. I really appreciate the lenses that were added. I was thinking about the green infrastructure as maybe going above the driving, but below biking and transit. Because if it is like a checklist, so to speak, that you go through in the process of designing a street, then I mean, I think we've heard loud and clear that the idea of having even one street without cars is pretty radical to some. And so it seems like just putting that above driving would make sure that green infrastructure is always included. But it would make sure that it's being done at the expense of roadway and not the expense of sidewalk space or bicycle facilities or transit amenities and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I like that. I do really like it being in the hierarchy, because as a complete street, it should be one of the elements of the street, not necessarily a lens. And we do look at it that way. Like, it's complicated design. It isn't as simple as, you know, a 4-inch thick sidewalk, right? There's a lot more that goes into making that decision. But I agree, if it's going above cars, then it's going to get in there. And if, you know, if the cars aren't on the street, then we're going to probably have a lot more space for green infrastructure. But I do like it because it is an element of the street, versus, you know, environmental or climate change is something that we would look at more holistically.
Ash gave that a second as well in the comments. What about freight in here?
I think the small freight vehicles, it should be or makes the most sense to be addressed in the parking hierarchy. That makes sense to me because of potential conflicts for space when we're trying to add a protected bikeway or something like that. In my position, in my view, I wouldn't want I think we need to prioritize the biking, as per our transportation action plan, and so I don't know. I worry about that conflict sometimes.
I would agree with that. This is Alyssa. I would agree with that, and I think too, right? I'm also thinking about it from like the climate change perspective of, are we encouraging lots of deliveries, or are we encouraging people to walk and bike to their local businesses and shop at their local businesses? And so anything that we can do to continue to push in that direction is good.
What do people think? And I'm just stating this just to get a reaction. What if we had these in here as well? Like that.
I like the way that looks. I think that.
I have a quick question. This is Membera. So this is the hierarchy is for general information to follow. So I'm wondering if this hierarchy will be different when we are dealing with the area purely residential versus industrial area. Are we able to change the hierarchy or prioritization? Do we get any input? We are not following the resident or business, but are we able to get the input from the resident or business owner and modify a little bit? Like industrial area, they may not need priority for sidewalk or sort of things.
I think part of what you're getting at is going to be addressed through the street design guide, where they're talking about certain types of streets have certain types of expectations. And there's definitely a call out for large freight generators where there are not residential uses. But this is meant to be like one hierarchy for the city. Obviously, each street is different, but we want to, we're saying that our priority as a city is to accommodate walkers and rollers. And that's something that I don't think is going to change dependent on the situation. Unless someone wants to say now that our priority is not walkers and rollers, and as Kathleen started with, that's a pretty fundamental assumption.
I think, Memberi, there's still like a design process and an engagement process that helps understand this, and this is more like our framework and guiding policy. So yeah, we're not going to design for transit if there's no transit in that neighborhood or that, super whatever, that project that we're talking about. So there's always context that plays into the actual decision-making process, but that this is kind of that overarching citywide philosophy.
Thank you.
I had one other comment that I was just thinking about. Having transit next to the bicycle and micromobility, I'd be curious to hear folks' thoughts on this. Like, just thinking, like, obviously I love to see transit prioritized, and Alyssa said that so well, that it is so important, especially for accessibility. I'm just wondering, in terms of like going about a street design process, there's many times transit can operate okay in the existing roadway and without really affecting its operations. But is in terms of someone biking or someone on a scooter, their safety is jeopardized in that same scenario without having like a bicycle facility on the roadway. And so I'm wondering if maybe transit could be like just below that, but above everything else. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there and be curious to hear what others have to say.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. I think this is like the real nitty gritty that we were looking to get feedback on. And I hope everybody who can watch the screen at your place of work right now is scribbling out your own preferences. And then I hope you take a picture or write them out and send them to me. because this is exactly the level of detail that I was hoping we could get to today.
So real quick, for me, that transit piece is one of the most interesting aspects of design when we're wrestling with, every foot of space. Because obviously I think everybody here understands and agrees that transit is such a critical component to walking and biking and just all of the modes. And so like sometimes the big challenge is how much space do we incorporate the transit stop itself into the cross section. And that's where it gets really tricky from the hierarchy perspective, is like, what do we mean when we have bike next to transit? And how does that impact the ped realm as well? And do you lean towards a really, really like high comfort transit stop experience? And then how does that impact like the width of the sidewalk and whether bikes can be on street or wrap behind it and that type of thing? So I tend to agree that maybe it should just go just below biking, because I think that experience off street is so important. But that's just something we wrestle with. I'll stop there.
I'm going to channel Alan. We all like channeling Alan. But so much of this is also, it's not just about design, but about operations, right? So when we're looking at detours or we're looking at, red paint type transit decisions, just the distinction, and I'm not saying, I think it was Alex, you were talking how they can often be in the same space as cars. While that's true, I think there's been a really important distinction when it comes to the operation side to have transit up there.
Hey, Katie, if I can join in, this is Alan. I'll turn my screen on so you can all see that. I appreciate the people who channel me, because most of you do better than I would as Alan. But I'm going to add in one other comment that's a little different. It's kind of an obvious one, but I just want to put it on the table if we want to think about it. I really appreciate the comments on operations. Those are the kind I tend to make. We talked a lot about space allocation. I want to go back to something Katie said a few moments ago, because a little light bulb went off in my head. And I don't know where this fits in, but the notion that green infrastructure, a topic I know very, very little about, I'll say that, but that I think it's the one thing on this diagram that has opportunity to go underground or, so to speak, off-site. And I just think there's something meaningful about that as we kind of, as Matthew just said a moment ago, we fight for every foot on space allocation. We may have one of our icons here that can go kind of invisible, and which probably implies higher cost component to do that, but maybe that's something, I don't know how you showed graphically on the chart here, but maybe that's something to keep in mind, that's an element that has some opportunity, cost comes with it, but has some opportunity to kind of quote unquote not take up space. And I get it, that's not every part of green infrastructure. Some of it will certainly take up, surface level space in the right of way. But again, just that comment that we have one element here that has some more flexible opportunity to it.
Steve Mahowald?
Yes, regarding the priority of transit and placing it below scooters and bikes, I certainly can understand that. And I think in large part we're understanding of that. But I think we also need to remember that transit's not going to be on every street, and that there's key corridors for transit, and in those corridors, those streets need to work well for transit. And perhaps, perhaps the bike corridors aren't, on the same streets that the transit, that we're trying to give priority or make sure transit is working smoothly. Perhaps they're different streets, and I think it's something that we should be thinking about in terms of how we might separate those corridors.
So Steve, I just want to jump in. The problem is that the aspects of those corridors that are attractive to transit are also very attractive for bicycling. Usually busy commercial corridors, lots of destinations, very direct, and so there are probably more than a handful of corridors where we have to wrestle with the fact that, the high volume transit and what we're calling AAA network or protected bikeway corridors are on the same corridor. And I don't see that moving. I just want to be clear, like we're passing the Transportation Action Plan in the next couple weeks, but yeah, so I mean, that is something we have to wrestle with.
Well, Matthew, excellent point. I mean, Hennepin Avenue is through Uptown is right. How you fit bikes into that, I think, is something that needs to be addressed. So that's a good point. And I think there are some corridors perhaps where the some areas where the bikes don't need to be on the same street as transit. But you're right, there are key corridors where they're both going to want to be on the same street.
I'm going to interrupt real quick. I have a hard stop at 10:30, so this screen is going to go away. Katie can handle how she wants to manage it. But one question I want to put out there, and if people have thoughts, maybe they can keep talking about it or email Katie or something. It's like, how do we integrate this parking hierarchy in or reflect it next to or something in this other hex, whatever the right trapezoid is? Like, is it an overlapping? Is there a nexus? Is it a Venn diagram? Like ideas around that. I would kind of, if I were to draw it with my mouse right now, I'd almost think of it as like a this, oops, like in here, there's like this overlapping triangle or something where you're prioritizing still these not, they're obviously a support system to all these ways of mobility, but.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thank you for driving that InDesign tool for us. I haven't touched InDesign in 10 years, so I really appreciate Kathleen's ability to do that for us for a meeting. So it is 10:30 and Kathleen's got a piece out. So I would encourage folks, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I would encourage folks to send me lots of emails at this point on the hierarchy. Send me drawings, send me pictures from your cell phone, whatever. I think this was an excellent jolting conversation for everyone to have, and I'm sure everybody has a lot of ideas about what the new graphic visualization should look like. So I would really encourage everyone to get back to me. I know it's a holiday, by the end of next week, December 4th, with your thoughts, so that we can start playing around with it some more. Are there any last minute questions before we hop off at 10:30 here? Seeing none. Thanks again, everybody. This was a terrific conversation and a very difficult to have virtually. So I really appreciate your time. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.